Hi everyone. Alright, we're going to do another hem today, and this is a hem that has a bias facing. There's a few different types of bias facings you can do on hems. I have another video on this channel with one. Okay, so this one's a little different. Alright, so the first thing you're going to need is, so this is the garment, this will be the hem. It has a right and wrong side, so the wrong side doesn't have any markings on it, the right side does. And this is our bias strip, okay? Again, these markings are the right side of it, and then there's nothing on the wrong side of it, okay? And this is a 2-inch wide bias strip, alright? And if you need to know how to find and cut bias, there's a link below that you can click on and have a video describing and showing how to do that. Alright, so let's go ahead and start with this bias strip. We'll get this out of the way. And we're going to press it in half the long ways. So we're just going to press it right in half like this, bringing cut edge to a cut edge. So let's go ahead and do that. And be careful not to stretch it as you press, because it is bias and it will stretch very easily. And again, I'm just bringing my cut edge to cut edge as I do this. Okay, there we go. Alright, so our bias has now been pressed in half the long ways, and you can see I can open it up, and that's what it looks like. Alright, so that was a 2-inch bias strip pressed in half, and now it's 1 inch wide. Okay, so now what we want to do is we're going to sew it to the bottom of our garment, and what we'll do is we'll open up the bias strip, and we'll put right side of the bias strip to right side of what will be our garment. And we're going to stitch this on at a 1/2 inch. Okay, so let's go ahead to the machine and do that. Okay, we're at the machine here. We're going to go ahead and stitch the bias strip onto our garment. Okay, so we have, again, right side to right side, lining up these cut edges. My bias strip that I pressed in half is open again. Okay, you can see here's the crease right here. And let's go ahead and stitch this on. Alright, so 1/2 inch, back tack, beginning and end. Here we go. And there we go, it's been stitched on at a 1/2 inch. Let's trim our threads. Alright, now let's cut off this extra, but we don't need any of this. Alright, so now what we need to do is we're going to fold this down, okay? And we're going to understitch right along this edge of our bias strip. Okay, so understitching is when we're going to catch, whether you usually do it on the part of the garment that's going to be on the inside. So what I'm talking about is like if you have a facing or a lining, or in this case a piece of bias. All right, the understitching will be on this piece of bias, because eventually that will get turned back and be on the inside of the garment. Alright, so we're going to stitch about a 1/16 of an inch away from that seam we just stitched, okay? And we're going to make sure all the seam allowances are folded down, okay? The seam allowance of the actual garment, the seam allowance of the bias strip, and then the bias strip will be folded over that like so, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so again, I'm going to stitch about a 1/16 of an inch away from that seam I just sewed. When I'm doing this, I want to make sure I'm pulling that bias strip and the garment in 2 opposite directions so I get a nice, clean, tight seam there. Alright, and let's go ahead and do that. Let's back tack at the beginning and end. So again, understitching, I'm basically top stitching through the top of my bias strip, and I'm catching all the seam allowances. And what this does, it will allow my bias strip to fold to the back much nicer, much cleaner, and it will pull about a 1/16 of an inch a 1/16 to an eighth of an inch of the fashion fabric to the back as well, giving me a nice clean finish on the outside. There we go. All right, we are stitched. All right, there it is. We've understitched right along that seam. All right, let's go back to the cutting table. All right, so here we are back. We've understitched. We're going to flip this over now, and here's all my seam allowance, okay? We're going to trim that seam allowance back to 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so we've trimmed that back, this seam allowance, to 1/4 of an inch. All right. Now what we want to do is on our bias strip, okay, we have this kind of, here's my crease right here, and we have about 1 inch of bias left past that. We're going to trim that back to about 1/4 of an inch as well. Okay. If you want to mark it on there, you can, but you can also just eye it, okay? So about 1/4 of an inch past this crease, we're trimming off the rest of that. There we go. And let's go ahead and flip this towards the back now. We're going to roll it to the back, and we're going to press it back just like that. Okay, so that 1/4 of an inch of bias we just trimmed back, we're going to make sure we fold that to the inside, and then fold back the bias just like that, giving us a nice clean edge. All right, so let's go ahead and press that. I'm just going to give it a press like this real quick. And then it's going to fold back that bias. And again, when you fold it back, it should pull back about a 1/16 of an inch of the fashion fabric. And you can manipulate it so it does. And I'm just going to press that back like so. There we go. All right. So now that's been pressed back. All right, and now what I want to do is stitch about a 1/16 of an inch away from the top of this bias right here, locking it in place and completing my hem. All right, so let's go back to the machine and do that. All right, we're back at the machine, the sewing machine. So now again, I'm going to stitch about a 1/16 of an inch from the top of this bias, and that will go through all layers, and that will complete this hem. Okay, back tack at the beginning and end. This is permanent. Here we go. And there we are. Okay, let's trim it. Okay, there it is. Let's go back to the ironing board. All right, so let's go ahead and give this a quick press. So flat. And there it is, and with the bias facing. So this is the wrong side. There's my bias facing. I flip it over. This is what it looks like from the right side. Just a row of stitching. And again, that stitching would blend in, because you pick thread that would match your fabric. All right. So hem with a bias facing. All right, good luck, everyone.